I've never done this before, so please forgive me if I'm not all that good at it. But I want to start with Bible verse, Romans 3, verse 23. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. I was one of those children where, all little boys have lots of energy, but I was one of those children that you often hear about as that extreme case of energy. I was definitely one of those. My mom can tell you of a story from when I could barely walk. She had put me down for an afternoon nap, and she put me in the crib. I could barely walk at that age, and she walked out, and thinking here's going to be her child who's going to sleep and going to give her some peace and quiet for a little bit. And all of a sudden she heard this racket come from in my room, like an extreme racket. And she comes running, and there I am, a little toddler, barely big enough to walk, holding onto the side of the crib and jumping so hard that the entire crib was jumping up and down with me. That was my mother's everyday life as I grew up. And when I first started going to school, my parents, they sent me to this school. It was on a Hutterite colony, and it was all Mennonite kids there. There's a couple Hutterite kids there, but all of them. But I have an older brother, and me and him both going to school there, and all these other people, we were the outcasts of that school. I mean really bad. We got picked on so much. There was never a day that we didn't come home and feel like crying because, here was these little first grader and second grader getting picked on so bad. We went there for, I think it was 1 year, and then the next year we went to a different school, mainly because of that, because my parents wanted us away from there. We went there 1 year, and then the second year we went back to school. The first day of school, we went to school and we walked into class, and there were all these horrible kids on the first day of school that had done that to me and my brother so often. And on the bus ride home that evening after school, me and my brother were talking. We always sat together on the bus. Me and him were, if one was there, the other one was there. We were always together. And we made a deal between each other. Those kids would never pick on us again. And I was in 3rd grade. And I became this horrible, horrible student in school. Everybody that has kids in school, their parents, they hear from their children from this one bully. There's always the one bully in the school that everybody knows. Everybody knows this bully as being this horrible little child. Nobody's kids enjoy this child. And that's a child I became. The teachers, they didn't like me. The principal, he always knew. Every day he would hear from me. And all these kids that were had done that to us in the first school. They didn't just get paid back double, not triple. They got back more than 100 times what they did to me. And that's how my school years went. I kept going, and I kept being this horrible little child in school. And on the bus, everything, the bus driver hated us, hated me. There was never a week that my parents didn't get a couple phone calls during the week. This is what your child did today. But my life, that was my life. And me and my brother one day, my parents went to town, and they came home, and they had these brand new shirts for us. We were so proud. They were top-notch shirts. We got to put them on, and right away we figured we'd run outside and we'd start playing. And we walked outside, and my parents were renting this place there, and this landlord had his horse in a small pen there. It was maybe about twice the size of this church that the pen was. And I talked to my brother. My brother was always the one that put the brakes on, and I was the one that pushed. I talked my brother into, let's get into this pen and let's chase this horse. What little child doesn't like chasing a horse? And we started running around and around. And about the third lap, we were looking behind us at the horse. And we ran and we ran. My brother got out early. He rolled out underneath the fence. By the time I got out, that horse was right behind me, and I jumped. And I jumped right through the barbed wire, and I tore my brand new shirt to pieces. There was nothing left of that shirt. And that's how I continued living my life. I kept chasing sin. And I'd chase it round and around, and it was so fun, and all of a sudden it was behind me, and I couldn't stop running, and I couldn't stop running. To this day, I still sometimes do that. I catch myself running from that after, and then all of a sudden it's running behind me. I was introduced to sexuality at a very young age, in a very, very wrong way. And it got a hold of me, big time. But as I was growing up, my dad, I still remember when they first bought the farm. They bought just a little bit of land, and it was so much fun, always helping my dad there. And my dad was still a trucker, and he did lots of loads into the BC mountains, and that was my time. That's when I liked to ride with my dad. I loved my father. He was my idol. As growing up, he was the man I wanted to be. But it got to the point where he got busier at work, and he got busier at home. And there was less and less time for me. And as I grew up, growing into the teenage years, there became a bitterness. It started growing in my heart for my dad and for my mom too. Here was this overactive child, and I had to deal with myself so often, and the only attention I got was when I had done something wrong. Mind you, I needed attention then. But it got to the point where I started to hate my father. I hated him. And I wish no child had to experience that ever, where they would rather not see their father. And I entered into my youth years. And when I entered, I slowly progressed to worse. At that point already, I was not a Christian, not by any means. But I can tell you one thing, I was not afraid of death. I've always been the kind of guy that likes to push stuff, have fun, to the point where it's going to get a little bit dangerous. But in my teenage years, that got to a whole new degree. There was this one time on a small, narrow little highway. I had a little Cavalier, and I was doing almost 100 kilometers an hour. And I pulled my handbrakes and I turned around on that highway. To this day, I still can't see how that car did not roll. But that wasn't at the end of it. A couple days later, me and some of my friends got together And I decided it'd be a good idea to get onto his roof while he was driving down a gravel road. And he drove, and he drove, and he swerved, and he swerved. And I don't know how I stayed on that roof. And I did not fall off. Well, now I know. It's only by the grace of God, because he had something in mind for me. But when I came home, it was a fight. It was always a fight. Then when I was 16, I decided it was better off if I was not at home. So I moved out. At first, I found this place I could stay at for cheap, and I stayed there until for the first month. And the very first Sunday that I moved out on a Friday, and that Saturday and Sunday I was with my best friend. And my girlfriend, my wife now. I was with them Saturday and Sunday. And that Sunday night, at about 11 o'clock at night, he drops me off. He was just going to go to town, drop his girlfriend off, and go right home from there. Would have taken him about an hour and a half to 2 hours. He should have been home by about 1 o'clock. And about 4 a.m., 4 in the morning, his parents called me, "Do you know where our son is?" I said, "I have no idea. He dropped me off." I went back to sleep. I didn't think much of it. And in the morning, I got a phone call that my best friend had died in a car accident. He had been dead for 6 hours before they found him. Those were some very bad days until the funeral, and the funeral happened. And I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with the Mennonite funerals, but anyway, they hauled their own dead to the church, and they hauled him to the grave. And his parents, they asked me to drive the vehicle to bring him to the church and to bring him to his grave. So I brought my best friend to his grave, where he lies today. I went home that day. A couple days went by, and I pretty much forgot about my friend. And I grew into a life of sin like nobody can imagine. I drank until I was sick. I was 16 years old. And I drank until I was laying there puking, and I thought I was having fun. But then these very good people, they took me in. They weren't even 10 years older than me. They had 3 little kids. Like, who would take a teenager like that into their house? And they loved me as their own child, which I can't imagine was easy. I was there for about 6 months. And during those 6 months, I had found a new best friend. I mean, me and him were always together, and I was a very, very bad influence on this guy. He had had an accident just previous to my other friend dying, and he was in a wheelchair, and on both legs were broken. I'm not sure how long he was in there, but he was in a wheelchair for a long time, and I started taking him to parties. And he was on all this heavy medication, and I got my friend to drink. He was younger than me. We were both 16, and here was my friend, on such strong painkillers that they barely did anything for him, and here I was convincing him to drink. And I grew into a life of fornication. And so it went till I was 18 years old. I decided now it was time to clean up my act. I decided to get baptized. And during my baptism, going through my baptism, I could not let go of my sexual sin. And here I thought I was doing a good thing. Here I thought I was going to start earning my way to heaven. And I could not let go of fornication. So we got baptized. I got baptized, and shortly thereafter we got married. We got married in July, and our son is born in January. I'll let you guys do the math. And I grew back into sin. After he was born, I'd come home after work, and I didn't want anything to do with my family. I wanted to sit down in front of the TV, turn the TV on, and I expected my wife to keep my son quiet so that I could pay attention here to the television. And for the first couple of years, I can tell you that my wife regretted marrying me because of the man that I turned into be. And it didn't take long. I grew back into sexual sin. I got into pornography, and it got worse and worse. I knew I was doing horrible things. I knew I wanted to get rid of it, but I couldn't. It kept on going, and it kept on going. And I'd go to work. I'd already worked long days, like 12-hour days. They were short days for me, and I'd work in the logging here. That's a 24-hour day job. One guy goes at night, and the other guy goes during the day. I was working 12-hour days minimum. And at the end of the day, I'd go to the shop. Instead of going home to my family, I'd stay at the shop. And I'd sit there and I'd have dirty jokes and dirty talks and just the most pathetic language, the most pathetic things that we do there. Started drinking with these guys. It was never to the point where I got drunk with these guys. But it was to the point where I couldn't go without it because everybody around me was doing it. And I can honestly tell you, drinking is not a good thing. If you're telling yourself that one beer is okay, you're already pushing it. I can tell you that from experience. But then it got so bad, and I started thinking of how I can work my way back to God, and to hopefully one day inherit the kingdom of God. So there was some people there in Whitecourt. They decided they wanted this one church that I got baptized in. That I got baptized to that church. They wanted that church to come to Whitecourt and started having church services there. And I was the only person that was a member at that church. And so they decided that I should go ask them, and I did. And I got them to come to Whitecourt. Every other Sunday they'd have church there. And I hated those Sundays. I woke up dreading those Sundays that they would come. I mean, they don't have the choir that we do here. They do it a little different there. It seemed everything was on my shoulders. The only thing I didn't do was preach a sermon. I mean, that would have been even worse. That would have been a bad idea for me. And I kept going with this church. The only reason I stayed there was because of the pastor that baptized me. He's a born-again brother. He was a born-again believer. And I don't know what he saw in me, but he just wouldn't let me go. I love that brother because he did so much for me, and he tried to guide me into the right way, but it didn't work. Not until I got so fed up of everything that I left that church. And I was nobody. I was going to no church. A little while later, we started going to a Baptist church in Whitecourt. It's a good church, but it wasn't for us. But that's where I realized that I was going to hell. There's nothing I could do. I was going to hell. Then into the fall of 2015, Jesus saved me. And I was born again. But I did something very, very horrible. after that. I didn't feed my soul. I didn't feed my soul with the Word of God. I came to church on Sundays. And when he saved me, he set me free from pornography. I didn't even realize it was months. I had been free for months before it all of a sudden clicked. Hey, wait a second. I haven't looked at pornography for months. That's what Jesus did for me. In John 8, in John 8:32, Jesus says, "And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." And in John 8:36, "If the Son therefore shall make you free, you shall be free indeed." And I realized right there what Jesus could really do. He could set you free from a sin that you had been battling for years and years, trying to be freed from it. That's what kind of God we have. We have an amazing God. But I failed him. And I didn't feed my soul. I went to church on Sundays. That wasn't enough. And it was all good. I read my Bible by that time more than I had ever done in my life, which was probably a chapter by that time. But it wasn't enough. And complications came between me and my wife. We got angry at each other once. And I wasn't home during that time. I was up north hauling logs there for a couple months that I could only come home on the weekends. And I fell back into pornography. A born-again Christian. But I had let go. I had not fed my soul. And for almost a year, I battled again. And I prayed, Jesus, please set me free. And then this January, one day I got so angry at myself. And I said, I don't care who knows. I don't care anymore. And I texted every brother I had on my phone number and said, I'm an addict. I'm addicted to porn. And I need help. And I was freed. This time, it was a true freedom. I mean, there's times today, even today, there's times when that's a real struggle, where I really got to rely on my faith in Jesus Christ to keep me away from there. I have slipped up from then twice since January, but I am free man today. I am free in the blood of Jesus. He is the only reason I am free. I want to read one more Bible verse. Hebrews 8, verse 12. For I will be merciful to the unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. Don't we have an amazing God? He doesn't just forgive us. He forgets. He forgets the sins, and we have a new life in Jesus Christ. So I thank my God every day. I thank my God every day for not letting me drown in my own sin again. Thank you.